This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to The Hindu's In Focus podcast with me, K. Bharat Kumar. The headline in a recent article was arresting. It said, India fears losing out to China in smartphone exports race. Another broke the news that Mexico had overtaken China in 2023 for the first time in 20 years as the largest exporter to the US. One more said, loud and clear at that India should realize that Vietnam and not China was its major competitor. There are a few dots we can connect to see a common thread in all of these that should interest us. One, the world does want to move away from China from a global supply chains perspective, but that cannot be done in entirety overnight because of the scale that country has built. And two, there are indeed some parts of the global supply chain that have begun moving. Is India poised to benefit from this? What lessons does the China model hold for us? And what is it that countries such as Vietnam are doing right to bolster foreign investments that are in turn spurring those countries' exports? To gain some insights into geoeconomic developments, we spoke to Biswajit Dhar, Distinguished Professor, Center for Social Development. Hello, and thank you, Professor, for sharing your time with us today.
Since 2019, when the government announced to incentivize new manufacturing units, investors from abroad setting up new manufacturing units, we had a flat 15% rate. Probably with the thought that, we need to compete with the likes of Vietnam. And that's 5 years now, and some water has flowed under the bridge. And then we've also had the PLI scheme and so on and so forth. But from what we speak to manufacturing industry people, the quantum of investments, and possibly thanks to PLI, in some sectors has been very good. Our export performance has been very good, likely in mobile phones and related electronics. But in others, we've not done as well as we would have wanted to. And then I came across a Bloomberg article headline that said, China is not the competitor to India, but Vietnam is. So we should know who we are competing against and so on and so forth. So that being the thought process in the industry currently, and of course, a lot of positivity around our economic growth emanating from the government, saying we're the bright spot in a gloomy global environment and all that. How well do you think we have done as far as attracting investments to spur both exports and to help bring down costs for domestic consumption?
Yeah, I think there are several problems there. You mentioned about the incentives that the government has given, and the PLI is also offering substantial incentives as well. Those 14 sectors, identified sectors. But like you said, except I think mobile phones, the performance, the PLI hasn't actually done as well as we expected it. I recently wrote a long article and analyzed the whole PLI scheme. And I must say I was very disappointed to see the performance, because I think this was one scheme that we were expecting, we had high expectations of. And we thought that, for the first time, the government has actually put the nuts and bolts together for the revival of the manufacturing sector. And all that talk that we have been, we have heard successive governments make from 2006, that, they wants to take the manufacturing share of manufacturing GDP to about 25%, 10% in 10 years. And it was a kind of a, sort of shifting goalpost. And it kept happening. It happened in the Make in India in 2014. But when the PLI came, and then the incentives prior to that given to the tax breaks and the reduction of tax rates, we thought that there was the government really meant business, and we are really going to see something come out of that. Now the problem is that I think there are certain basic things about an industrial policy that needs to be kept in mind, and the policymakers haven't done that when they're designing the PLI. The first thing is that you don't get an industrial policy getting off the ground or taking off without an innovation policy, put together. Because in today's world, when technologies are moving so fast, you can't be saying that I'm going to be setting up a manufacturing facility today, and that's going to serve me for the next 10 years. No, that's not going to happen. Yeah? And I've got a technology, and I'll put it, look for 10 years. There has to be constant sort of upgrading, and we all know this. This is the truism, the world we live in today, and we have to do that. Now, we haven't actually done that. We haven't actually been able to do that. The second is that the name of the game, and China has taught us this, is scale economies. Yeah. So you can't actually have these manufacturing capacities spread over a large number of companies, small companies. The MSMEs can do the backup in terms of providing certain intermediates and all that. But upfront, when you're talking about, say, any sector that you think of, you need scales. And I always say that the magic of scale economy is something that we studied only in the textbooks. But what it could be in reality is what China has shown us. Yeah. So I think when the government went out and looked for potential candidates to implement the PLI scheme, and here I'm going to be dwelling on the PLI scheme for the moment, then that should have been kept in mind. You should have seen who can deliver, because again, industrial policy is about picking winners. You can't just go and give licenses to whoever and do whatever. Yeah, and the third thing is that you can't be too nosy. Yeah, like you said that ease of doing business. The government can't be too nosy. Yeah, and what it seems by looking at the PLI scheme, that in many ways we are getting back to the license control Raj. Yeah. Because the government is telling the producers how much to produce for getting what kind of incentive, and then this incentive level goes up as you produce more. Now, all that means that there is going to be an inspector. So inspector comes in and says, "Oh, you produce this much, I'll give you this much." Yeah, and then so this is not like what it should be. Yeah, and finally, and I would actually try to move into what Vietnam did. There doesn't seem to be any sort of clear vision as to what these manufacturers, the new manufacturers, are going to be doing. Are they going to be producing for the domestic market, or exports, or both? Yeah. Now, given the period in which PLI scheme was announced, that was, you remember, the rhetoric was vocal for local, Atmanirbhar. Yeah. So it was actually set in this tone that we are too dependent on China, and we are now going to be producing everything here. Yeah. And now the moment you do that, you go back to the earlier era of import substitution. Yeah. Then you start thinking only in terms of a closed economy framework. You don't give importance to the export markets. Yeah. If you have to design an industrial policy that actually caters to the export market, and then you do completely different things. Then you do the things that I mentioned, that you bring in innovation, you want to make it more competitive. See, the scale economies are are realized. So all those things are put into the framework. Now that's the big difference between India and Vietnam. Now Vietnam, as you know, is a super exporting economy. Yeah? It's completely export oriented, and after China, I would say this is the country which is actually imitated exactly what China did, and became really focused on the export market, and did everything that is required to put the manufacturing sector on a sustainable and a growing pathway. So what does that mean? So one, again, the difference between India and China, they developed all the right kinds of skills that are required for really allowing a manufacturing sector to take off. So in terms of the skill sets available in Vietnam, they're highly skilled. Yeah. And again, this is a very a similar story as, like China. And they're able to utilize that skilled workforce. That's a serious problem here. After more than a decade, all these skill initiatives happened during the UPA period, and for after more than a decade, we actually don't know where we are. Yeah, so we haven't been able to get our act together.
So sorry to interrupt, but since you mentioned skill, I thought I should bring this question in here. So the industry in India that employs the maximum, at one point it was the tea industry with the very low skill, but then the IT services overtook the tea industry in the early 2000s. And then, even then, we didn't have a skilled manpower skill that is required for IT service. So when we used to speak to these top sponsors of IT companies, they used to say, it's the lack of tax. The STPA scheme gave them a tax-free status if they exported for whatever revenue from export. They said it's actually, it's a misnomer. You're taxing us in terms of having to train our workforce. But if I get in a fresher and for 6 months, if he is not billable, he or she is not billable, that's one form of tax. I have to buy my own water. And they used to say also roads, but it's actually true, sir. In Chennai, that's what happened. In one manufacturing unit that I think the Prime Minister of the time was supposed to inaugurate, the road from the highway into the gate till the gate of the manufacturing unit was not ready. So they actually the unit had to buy privately red carpet so that, there is no mishap in terms of the Prime Minister tripping and all that. So even roads, sometimes the local roads around these units had to be built by these IT services companies. So they don't say we are tax-free. Indirectly, there's some form of tax. So having learned lessons from that, in PLI, do you think we could have said, look, this PLI scheme would, become applicable to this unit if you show proof of having trained so many people for your, your manufacturing factory or whatever. Do you think that would have worked? Because there's a huge gap between skill required and skill available. There's no denying that in India, and more college graduates coming out but not employed.
Yeah, no, I was just coming to that because see on a different, since you brought this issue up on the skills and gave it another dimension. I would also say that look, for a long time, there used to be this discussion in some quarters still is that what are the basic sort of ingredients that a foreign company is looking at? What are the factors that the foreign companies are looking at in a host country, which tells them that this is their investment destination? Yeah. So there are these issues, things like there would be you require large markets. You need large markets, so you'll go and invest there. You need some resources, critical resources like raw materials. You'll go there. And then one of the things that was discussed from the 90s was that they also need cheap labor force, yeah, and to compete. So India is the right destination for foreign companies because we have a large army of cheap workforce. But then of course there's more to it. But many analysts missed it, and then they kept on doing this kind of an analysis, saying that what is happening. They couldn't understand why this was happening because investment was not coming in here. Investment was going to China, foreign investment. Yeah. So why is it that India, and we are liberalizing a foreign investment regime, but still investment is not coming? So what is the problem? The problem is that it's not skills that they're looking at. They're also looking at efficient workforce. And not cheap labor wage. They're looking at wage. They're looking at skills and efficient workforce. So, like you said, that the foreign investors don't have the time, and they're not going to be doing this. They're not going to be investing in the basics of a country. Well, let us be fair to them, because there are a lot of criticism against foreign investors. That the foreign investors are mandated to make money. So their shareholders are having asked them to actually get as much of profits as possible. That's it. So they will cut costs and they will try to maximize, and that's a rational commercial firm. That's how they do it. So when the governments had come and told us that, look, foreign companies are going to be investing in infrastructure, foreign companies are going to be creating skills, so you're barking up the wrong tree. Yeah. So these are the things the government is supposed to be doing, like China did. So China built the infrastructure, and that's exactly what the Vietnamese are doing. Yeah. Build the entire infrastructure and conveyed a very clear message to them. Look, you just have to come in here, start producing and make your money. Yeah. And China, as we all know, have these special economic zones where it is plug and play. Yeah. Everything is there. Went to one of the special economic zones near Beijing. So even workers' dormitories were built by the government. And then what happens is that when the investor is interested, and like this special economic zone has a port like Tianjin, about 150 miles away, and then there is this, that fast train which covers 50 kilometers in 30 minutes. Yeah, so all that is there. So when the investors are coming in, of course, they've been lured. Then the government can negotiate. Yeah, and they have negotiated all kinds of things. Yeah, including tech transfer. Yeah, and making Chinese companies work with these big multinationals and sitting there and sponging their technology. That's the thing. So the multinationals, and very few are complaining. Even now, they're not complaining that much that this has happened, because they're making their money. Now, on each count, India is actually falling behind. Now, for instance, we had this SEZ policy in 2005. Yeah. And what was, if you look at the policy, it was said that we're going to provide world-class infrastructure. And one of the things, so maybe, there are few studies which showed there was some infrastructure. But what you had mentioned in between, that, the road from wherever for the prime minister to go and inaugurate, the road was non-existent. So what has happened that SEZs have the infrastructure, but from the SEZ to the port, there is nothing. Yeah. So it makes it unattractive. So when the SEZ policy was announced, there were, the number of SEZs which are registered and all were, I think, 450 plus. And how many are functioning? Hardly, properly, I would say. So I think what has happened is that once you miss this whole thing about being export oriented, that you have a market where you have competition, and they have discerning consumers will not take a substandard product. Yeah, because that's the other leg of it. So pharma companies are getting into all kinds of trouble. We are not able to get good quality product as consumers, and we know the difference very well, but we can't do anything because we can't just go and start buying imported products. But that is the problem. So if the government can't talk to the business, because the business is still not, because business is very happy that they have this large internal market. Yeah, even 150 million middle class is a market they're not going to get anywhere in the world except China. Yeah. So fine, I'm going to make it, we're going to invest, produce whatever, and sell it to the domestic consumers. I don't have to do anything in terms of looking at the export market. Now, I think this is the problem, that a country which was completely devastated, ravaged in the 60s and started in the 70s, in a short period of time, is way ahead of India in terms of a destination for foreign investors, and we are still, scraping the bottom of the pot.
So it's an interesting point you make, Professor. So which means, I don't know, I'm putting a number here. So we are 10 years behind, because if I have to start investing in skills, infrastructure, maybe we'd be able to do this quicker, maybe even 2-3 years if we put all our might, muscle, and money into it. But skills is skills. Without manpower, you cannot have a healthy manufacturing sector, even with a lot of robotic interventions. So we are what, 10 years behind? Do you think we can catch up? What exactly do you think India should be doing now, going forward from now?
No, even infrastructure. See, I think, like I said, it's a mindset issue. So, like since the 90s, after the economic reforms, since then we have been hearing about port reforms, yeah, and improving the turnaround time in the ports. Yeah, we are still way behind, say, a country like Vietnam. We are still talking in terms of days, and these guys are talking in terms of hours. Yeah. So my short point is that if your priority was exports, yeah, then you would actually invest where it is. So all of us do exactly that, huh? So when we need something, we put money there, huh? Otherwise, we are not going to be wasting money there. So it almost seems that is not something that interests us, huh? It at least interests the government and the business, yeah. And otherwise, the business, if it was interested in the exports, they would have come and rung the bell here, huh? in the ministries that matter, huh? That look, hey, do something about the port infrastructure. We wouldn't have seen a situation where this thing Honda comes and sets up a facility near Chennai, and then creates its own berthing facilities, because if it relies on government of India, it is just going to go crazy. So they came here for the market, but then when they were relying on the value chains, and then they were importing components, they found that they just can't do business here. So they went and invested in the berthing facilities in the Chennai port. Yeah.
This is Hyundai, right? Korean company Hyundai.
Honda. Now Hyundai and Maruti, Suzuki, they have facilities near Delhi. So the Japanese are putting money on the Delhi Mumbai, that industrial corridor, Delhi Mumbai industrial corridor. So they waited long enough, realized that the government is not going to do that. They need a dedicated corridor, so they're doing it. Yeah. So this is what is happening. So when foreign governments are backing their companies who are actually interested in exporting, our government is not pushing our companies to participate in the global markets and in exports.
So it's very interesting. It probably negates my final question on the topic. So I was about to ask you if free trade agreements with specific blocks of countries or specific countries like the UK, Australia, and UAE we've had so far, and we're working on one. No, UK we have not. We're working on one with the UK. So these actually are maybe important, but they're not critical, is what you seem to say. So even if I just looked up, and I don't know how dated this piece of information is, Vietnam has some 18 FTAs, including RTAs, and India has about 13. So doesn't make a difference if we don't have the building blocks in place. Would that be your opinion?
Yeah, no, I think, see, India, if you see in terms of the major FTAs, then we have three FTAs, the major ones, ASEAN, Japan, Korea. Yeah. The UAE thing, it's not a kind of we're doing it with our entrepot, doesn't really matter that much. Australian FTA is a early harvest, so it's not a full FTA. And as compared to that, the number for Vietnam is 16, and they are negotiating with EFTA, the European Free Trade Area, Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Now, and then they are into these. The 16 include RCEP, from which we came out, CPTPP, which is TPP, minus the US. And of course, the free trade agreement with the European Union. Yeah? And Vietnam is actually benefiting from all these FTAs. Yeah. Now, one other thing I must say is that when the TPP negotiations were taking place, the US had actually imposed a very strong, very I thought stringent condition on the Vietnamese, that they have to reform their labor laws, yeah, and they have to bring the labor laws in conformity with the ILO conventions. All those. Now, as you know, we have not ratified two critical ILO conventions, and the government is going on the other side. And my understanding is that our FTA with European Union is going to fail on this count because the European Union will not accept any FTA without a labor clause. Yeah. Now, if you look at so there is this hesitation or reluctance on the part of the government to give the workers their due. Yeah. And today, if India has to participate in the global value chains, there is something called due diligence, which has been pushed by the OECD, by the European Union, and all along the value chains, they ensure that there is human rights are ensured, labor rights are protected to the full extent. You can't have it otherwise. Yeah. But I don't really understand, why we just want to look the other way. Yeah, because here is a country like Vietnam, with its socialist past and all those kinds of issues. They transformed the labor market. Yeah, and participated in FTAs, and they do it very willingly, and they do it very proactively, and they don't have a problem. Yeah, and they are actually their workforce is progressing. Yeah, so in terms of scales and everything, they're progressing. So so there is no problem, and we are completely on the other side. We don't want to give workers rights. We are resistant to signing FTAs because we know that our industries are going to be completely decimated.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. So you said when we were going the other side, I thought India intent, at least, if not in action, but intent was to protect workers' rights because the hire and fire culture of the West should not come in here. Or am I mistaken there?
No, because see what we are doing is that we are actually going in for flexible labor markets. Yeah, and the workers' rights are actually being truncated. This is the problem with the labor codes coming in. This is exactly what is happening because this is what the industry wants. Because the industry in India, the businesses in India are surviving on the entire wage arbitrage. So they keep on pushing the wages down to the extent that now we have reached the rock bottom. And what has happened is that because we are doing this, I'll just take it on 1 minute. The domestic demand has gone for a toss because people don't have any money in their hands. So now we're going to a vicious cycle because there is no demand. Private investment is not coming in. Yeah. So the government is talking about crowding in private investment, which Nirmala Sitharaman did. It has been doing repeatedly. But private sector, year after year, you guys have been reporting, is actually coming down. It's not happening. Because investors are not going to put money if they can't sell their wares. Simple as that. Yes. So I think, we are so wrong in so many different ways that I think the first thing that needs to be changed is a mindset. Yeah. And once the mindset changes, I think, time is not really the factor. We can do it rather quickly. And how you're going to change the mindset, no one knows.
Okay, I think you glided into the end of the conversation. So I think this is very valuable for my episode, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate your time and very crisp answers. It helps people like us. I think you made it very clear. One, if we set our minds to it, we can do it quickly. Skills, infrastructure, willingness to negotiate as per ILO norms, for FTAs. FTAs are also valuable. Skills are also valuable. Infrastructure is valuable. I think these three counts make a lot of sense. So I'm going to put together.
In brief, I would say physical and human infrastructure. Yeah. So you got to look at both. Right now, we are only talking about physical infrastructure. We are not really paying too much of attention to the human infrastructure, which is critical.
Correct.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.